crisp and fresh. And this is the brightest, crunchiest new way to enjoy breakfast. Crunchy nut corn flakes make breakfast sound better than ever.
In 1876, a young physician named John Harvey Kellogg became superintendent of the Western Health Reform Institute in Battle Creek, Michigan. He was 24 years old, a recent medical school graduate, and absolutely convinced that most of humanity was eating itself to death. Kellogg wasn't entirely wrong. The American diet in the late 1800s was heavy, meat-centric, and often poorly preserved. People suffered from digestive ailments, constipation, and various maladies that modern medicine would later attribute partly to poor nutrition. But Kellogg's diagnosis went far beyond nutrition. He believed that diet affected not just physical health, but moral character. Certain foods, he was convinced, inflamed the passions and led to sin. Other foods promoted purity, clarity of thought, and spiritual elevation. At the top of his dangerous foods list, meat, spices, alcohol, coffee, and anything that tasted particularly good. These stimulated the body, excited the senses, and encouraged what Kellogg delicately called self-abuse, a Victorian euphemism for masturbation, which Kellogg considered the root of countless physical and moral ailments. Kellogg was a Seventh-day Adventist, a religious movement that emphasized health reform as spiritual practice. Adventists avoided meat, alcohol, and tobacco. They believed the body was a temple that shouldn't be defiled with harmful substances. But even by Adventist standards, Kellogg was extreme. He was a vegetarian who also avoided eggs and dairy. He never consumed alcohol or coffee. He slept only 4 hours per night, believing excessive sleep weakened character, and he remained celibate throughout his marriage, convinced that sexual activity, even within marriage, damaged health. This austere lifestyle, Kellogg believed, kept him healthy and energetic. He saw himself as living proof that denying physical pleasure led to superior vitality, and he was determined to share this wisdom with others. The Western Health Reform Institute was renamed the Battle Creek Sanitarium under Kellogg's leadership. Sanitarium, not sanatorium, a place for healthy living, not just treatment of disease. Kellogg transformed it into something between a hospital, a spa, and a religious retreat. Patients came to Battle Creek to be cured of various ailments through diet, exercise, and what Kellogg called biologic living. They submitted to his rigorous routines, bland vegetarian meals, vigorous calisthenics, bizarre treatments involving water, electricity, and mechanical vibration. Kellogg was a charismatic lecturer and writer. He published extensively on health topics, promoting his theories to a public hungry for medical authority. His book, Plain Facts for Old and Young, warned against the dangers of sexual indulgence in graphic, alarming detail. He was also a genuine innovator. Many of his ideas, exercise, vegetarianism, whole, grains, clean water, were ahead of their time and have been validated by modern medicine. But mixed with sound advice were bizarre theories and treatments that ranged from useless to harmful. The sanitarium grew rapidly under his leadership. By the 1880s, it was a sprawling complex, attracting wealthy clients from across America and beyond. Celebrities, industrialists, politicians, they came to Battle Creek seeking health and left as devotees of Kellogg's methods. And central to those methods was breakfast. Kellogg was convinced that the typical American breakfast, eggs, bacon, sausage, all dripping with fat and seasoned with pepper, was poisoning people and inflaming their baser instincts. He needed an alternative, something bland, grain-based, easy to digest, something that wouldn't excite the passions or stimulate impure thoughts. He needed to invent a new food, and in doing so, he would accidentally create an industry. If you love stories of the past, the kind that remind us how small inventions shape the world, consider subscribing. We make these videos free so you can fall asleep learning something new about history. Your support helps us keep these quiet stories alive. Now let's get back to the video. In the sanitarium kitchen in 1894, John Harvey Kellogg and his younger brother, Will Keith Kellogg, were experimenting with wheat dough. They were trying to create a digestible bread product for patients, something that even those with the weakest digestive systems could handle. The process involved boiling wheat, then running it through rollers to create thin sheets that could be baked. But on this particular day, the dough had been left sitting too long. When they finally ran it through the rollers, instead of forming a sheet, it broke into flakes. The brothers could have discarded the batch, but they were curious. They toasted the flakes and tasted them. They were crispy, light, and surprisingly palatable, even without seasoning or sugar. John Harvey saw potential immediately. These flakes met his dietary requirements perfectly. They were grain-based, contained no animal products, and were mild enough to avoid exciting the senses. Patients could eat them with milk for breakfast instead of the heavy, sinful fare of eggs and meat. They began serving wheat flakes at the sanitarium. Patients liked them well enough, though most found them rather bland. John Harvey considered this a feature, not a bug. Food wasn't supposed to be exciting. It was fuel for biologic living. But the patients who stayed at Battle Creek took the taste for these flakes home with them. After leaving the sanitarium, they wanted to continue eating the health foods they'd become accustomed to. They wrote to the Kelloggs, asking where they could purchase wheat flakes. This created an opportunity. Will Keith Kellogg, known as WK, saw commercial potential. His brother didn't. WK was the business-minded brother, patient and pragmatic, where John Harvey was visionary and eccentric. WK suggested they sell wheat flakes by mail order to former patients. John Harvey agreed, seeing it as extending the sanitarium's health mission. The Sanitas Food Company was founded in 1897 to produce and sell their health foods. The wheat flakes sold modestly well, but WK kept experimenting. He tried using corn instead of wheat. Corn flakes were lighter, crispier, and, though he wouldn't admit this to his brother, tastier. He sent samples to former patients, and the response was enthusiastic. John Harvey wasn't entirely pleased with cornflakes. They were perhaps too enjoyable. Food that tasted good encouraged overeating and sensory indulgence. But patients wanted them, so he reluctantly included them in the product line. WK also discovered that adding a small amount of sugar to the flakes made them significantly more palatable. This horrified John Harvey. Sugar was stimulating. It encouraged pleasure-seeking. It defeated the entire purpose of bland, healthful eating. The brothers argued about this constantly. John Harvey insisted the flakes remain unsweetened. WK saw that sweetened flakes would sell far better and could reach a mass market beyond sanitarium patients. The tension between health mission and commercial success would define the Kellogg story for years. John Harvey saw their foods as medicine, part of a comprehensive lifestyle philosophy. WK saw them as products that could be manufactured and sold to millions. Other sanitarium patients were also noticing the commercial potential of health foods. C.W. Post, a former patient, started his own company making grain-based breakfast products. His grape nuts and postum became hugely successful, proving there was a large market for these foods. Post's success infuriated John Harvey and motivated W.K. Post had essentially copied their ideas and was making a fortune. If they didn't move quickly, others would dominate the breakfast cereal market they'd accidentally created. In 1906, W.K. Kellogg founded the Battle Creek Toasted Corn Flake Company, separate from the sanitarium's food business. His plan was to mass-produce corn flakes and market them nationally. John Harvey objected. This commercialization conflicted with his health mission. These foods were supposed to promote biologic living, not generate profits. He refused to endorse W.K.'s company or allow use of his signature on the products. The brothers fought bitterly. Eventually, W.K. bought out John Harvey's interest and proceeded on his own. Their relationship never recovered. They barely spoke for the rest of their lives. W.K. had the flakes. Now he needed to convince America to eat them. And for that, he needed more than the health claims. He needed marketing, branding, and a vision of breakfast that would transform American mornings forever, had accidentally created. The sanitarium's fame had drawn entrepreneurs and imitators. Many were former patients who'd experienced Kellogg's grain-based breakfasts and seen their commercial potential. Others were opportunists who'd heard about Post's success and wanted a piece of the action. The resulting competition was cutthroat. Companies sprang up overnight with names like Vim, Grape Sugar Flakes, Triabeta, and Perfo. Most produced variations on the same basic product, toasted grain flakes, and made similar health claims about digestive benefits and vigor. C.W. Post was the most successful of Kellogg's competitors. His company, Postum Cereal, marketed aggressively with innovative advertising. Post claimed his products cured everything from malaria to loose teeth. He spent heavily on national advertising, creating brand awareness far beyond Battle Creek. Post understood something John Harvey Kellogg didn't. People wanted their health foods to taste good. His grape nuts included malt for flavor. His corn flakes were sweetened. He marketed pleasure alongside health, promising foods that were both good for you and enjoyable. W.K. Kellogg watched Post's success and learned. When he launched his Toasted Corn Flake Company in 1906, he adopted similar marketing strategies. His corn flakes would be lightly sweetened, not enough to alarm health advocates, but enough to make them appealing to children and adults who weren't committed to the austere Kellogg dietary philosophy. The Kellogg signature became his brand's centerpiece. W.K.'s signature appeared on every box, a guarantee of authenticity and quality. None genuine without this signature, the boxes proclaimed. This distinguished his product from the dozens of imitators. Quality control was another differentiation. Many Battle Creek cereal companies were fly-by-night operations producing inconsistent products. W.K. invested in modern equipment and standardized processes. His corn flakes were uniformly crisp, evenly toasted, and reliably fresh. He also innovated in packaging. Early cereals came in plain cardboard boxes or bulk barrels. W.K. developed the wax paper inner liner that kept flakes fresh and crisp. His boxes featured colorful graphics and the distinctive Kellogg's logo that would become iconic. Advertising was critical. W.K. bought full-page ads in newspapers and magazines across the country. The ads didn't just promote corn flakes. They promoted the idea of ready-to-eat breakfast cereals as modern, convenient, and healthful. The messaging walked a careful line. The ads invoked health benefits without the extreme claims that characterized John Harvey's writings or Post's advertisements. They emphasized convenience. No cooking required, just add milk. They targeted mothers, positioning Corn Flakes as the right way to feed children. The scale of WK's operation separated him from competitors. While most Battle Creek cereal companies were small ventures, WK built a modern factory capable of producing tens of thousands of boxes daily. This allowed him to price competitively and distribute nationally. By 1910, consolidation was beginning. Many of the 40-plus cereal companies had failed or been absorbed. The market was coalescing around a few major players, Kellogg's, Post, and the Quaker Oats Company, which had entered the ready-to-eat cereal market with puffed wheat and puffed rice. The breakfast wars included some bizarre tactics. Companies hired private detectives to steal competitors' recipes. They spread rumors about each other's products. They filed lawsuits over trademark and patent infringement. The genteel world of health food had become cutthroat business. W.K. Kellogg proved to be a fierce competitor. When Postum tried to market Post Toasties as a direct competitor to Kellogg's Corn Flakes, W.K. responded with aggressive advertising and price cuts. When other companies tried to use the Kellogg name, he sued relentlessly. But he also innovated. In 1906, Kellogg's introduced special promotions, free samples, money-back guarantees, and prizes. These marketing techniques were new to food products and proved highly effective. The Battle Creek breakfast wars were transforming not just cereal, but American marketing and business practices. The intense competition drove innovation in manufacturing, advertising, and distribution that would influence industries far beyond breakfast foods. And at the center of it all, ironically, was the bland health food John Harvey Kellogg had created to suppress pleasure and promote moral living. His austere Corn Flakes, designed to prevent sin, had launched an industry built on appealing to consumers' desires. The breakfast cereal that was supposed to cure sin had become big business, and business, it turned out, was very good. While W.K. Kellogg was building a cereal empire, his brother John Harvey was expanding the sanitarium into something increasingly bizarre. The Battle Creek Sanitarium in the early 1900s was part health resort, part medical facility, and part theater of the absurd. Patients arriving at Battle Creek submitted to John Harvey's complete system of biologic living. Their day began at 5:30 a.m. with mandatory calisthenics, organized exercise routines performed in groups, led by instructors who demonstrated proper form. Breakfast was, naturally, Corn Flakes or other grain-based cereals with milk. No coffee, no tea. These were stimulants. Instead, patients drank Postum or other grain-based coffee substitutes that Kellogg approved of. No sugar beyond minimal amounts, no salt, no pepper or spices. After breakfast came treatments. The sanitarium offered dozens of therapies, many of Kellogg's own invention, ranging from sensible to surreal. Hydrotherapy was central. Patients received various water treatments, hot baths, cold baths, alternating hot and cold baths. They were sprayed with high-pressure water jets. They sat in steam cabinets with only their heads protruding. They received enemas, lots of enemas. Kellogg believed thorough bowel cleansing was essential for health. The most infamous enemas involved yogurt. Kellogg was an early advocate of probiotics, though he didn't use that term. He believed the beneficial bacteria in yogurt could heal the digestive system, so patients received yogurt enemas administered from above and below simultaneously, yogurt eaten and yogurt inserted rectally. Electrotherapy was another favorite. Patients were attached to electrical devices that delivered mild shocks, supposedly stimulating circulation and nerve function. Kellogg demonstrated these treatments personally, hooking himself to the machines to show their safety and effectiveness. Mechanical vibration therapy used devices that shook and vibrated different body parts. There was a vibrating chair, a vibrating platform, handheld vibrators applied to various areas. Kellogg claimed these improved circulation, aided digestion, and promoted general vitality. The light therapy room featured what Kellogg called the electric light bath, a cabinet lined with incandescent bulbs where patients sat in intense heat and light. This was supposed to draw toxins from the body through perspiration. Patients also received massages, not gentle spa-style massages, but vigorous manipulation intended to stimulate organs and improve function. Masseurs kneaded abdomens, pummeled backs, and twisted limbs according to Kellogg's theories about where stimulation was needed. Exercise equipment filled several rooms, mechanical horses that patients rode while stationary, rowing machines, weightlifting apparatus. Kellogg believed in vigorous exercise, unusual for the era when rest was more commonly prescribed for illness. The sanitarium dining room enforced strict rules. Patients ate in silence or listened to educational lectures about health while eating. Food was to be chewed thoroughly. Kellogg recommended 30 chews per bite. Eating too quickly was considered harmful and was monitored by staff. Some patients embraced the full program enthusiastically. They followed every rule, submitted to every treatment, and reported feeling wonderfully healthy. Many of these became lifelong adherents of Kellogg's methods and regular visitors to Battle Creek. Others found the experience difficult. The bland food, the rigid schedule, the uncomfortable treatments. Some patients left early, unwilling to continue. But social pressure kept many participating. At Battle Creek, everyone knew who followed the program and who didn't. The sanitarium had a strange social atmosphere. Wealthy patients mingled with middle-class health seekers. Celebrities were common. Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Amelia Earhart all visited. The dining room was a place to see and be seen, despite the requirement to eat in silence. Kellogg himself was the star attraction. He gave daily lectures on health topics, speaking with evangelical fervor about diet, exercise, and clean living. He performed public demonstrations of treatments, showing their safety and effectiveness. His energy and confidence were compelling. But beneath the health mission was troubling ideology. Kellogg was a eugenicist who believed in racial hierarchies and supported forced sterilization of those he deemed unfit. His health teachings included racist and pseudo-scientific theories about physical and moral differences between races. These beliefs were common among progressive-era reformers, but Kellogg was particularly committed to them. The sanitarium's emphasis on physical perfection and moral purity reflected his eugenicist thinking, though most patients were probably unaware of the full implications. The sanitarium reached its peak in the 1920s, with over 1,000 patients at a time and a staff of thousands. It was a self-contained world where Kellogg's theories were absolute truth and his word was law. But it was also increasingly disconnected from mainstream medicine. As scientific understanding of nutrition and health improved, Kellogg's more extreme theories were being questioned. His treatments seemed less like medicine and more like peculiar rituals. Still, the sanitarium thrived, because whatever else it was, Battle Creek offered something people wanted: attention, community, structure, and the promise of health through dedication to a system. And that bowl of corn flakes each morning, it was communion, a daily reminder that you were part of something larger, a movement, a lifestyle, almost a religion. W.K. Kellogg had a problem. He'd built a factory that could produce millions of boxes of corn flakes annually, but he needed millions of Americans to buy them, and most Americans had never eaten ready-to-eat cereal for breakfast. The traditional American breakfast in the early 1900s was heavy: eggs, bacon or sausage, fried potatoes, toast with butter, coffee. It was filling, familiar, and required cooking. Why would someone switch to a box of flakes you poured into a bowl? WK's answer was advertising on a scale never before attempted for a food product. In 1906, he spent $300,000 on advertising, an enormous sum equivalent to millions today. This was nearly his entire profit, and a gamble that could have bankrupted the company. The ads appeared in newspapers and magazines nationwide. They featured bold headlines: "Try Kellogg's Toasted Corn Flakes," and "The original bears this signature," highlighting WK's signature as the mark of genuine Kellogg's products. But the messaging wasn't primarily about health, despite the product's origins in John Harvey's sanitarium. WK understood that harping on digestive function and bowel health wasn't appealing to most consumers. Instead, his ads emphasized convenience, modernity, and family happiness. Images showed cheerful families eating breakfast together, smiling children enjoying their cornflakes, mothers freed from the drudgery of cooking elaborate breakfasts. The implicit promise: Kellogg's cornflakes would make mornings easier and families happier. The funny Jungle and Moving Pictures promotion in 1909 was revolutionary. WK created an illustrated booklet featuring cartoon animals that children could collect. Each box of Kellogg's cornflakes included one booklet, and the complete set could be assembled by purchasing multiple boxes. This was among the first use of collectibles to drive food purchases, a marketing technique that would become standard in the cereal industry. Children begged their mothers to buy Kellogg's so they could complete their collections, creating demand driven by desire rather than nutrition. In 1914, Kellogg's introduced a money-back guarantee. Try the cereal, and if you don't like it, return the empty box for a full refund. This reduced purchase risk and demonstrated confidence in the product. Few people actually requested refunds, but the guarantee itself increased sales. Free samples were another innovation. WK hired teams to distribute single-serving boxes of cornflakes door-to-door in cities and towns across America. Once people tasted the product at no cost, many became regular buyers. The advertising created brand recognition. The Kellogg's name and signature became familiar to millions. When shopping, people asked for Kellogg's specifically, not generic cornflakes. This brand loyalty allowed WK to charge premium prices. Packaging evolved into a marketing tool. The boxes became increasingly colorful and eye-catching. The Kellogg's rooster mascot was introduced, a friendly, recognizable symbol. The boxes themselves became advertisements, designed to stand out on store shelves. WK also targeted specific demographics. Advertisements in women's magazines emphasized how Corn Flakes made breakfast preparation easier for housewives. Ads in agricultural publications stressed the wholesomeness of grain-based foods. Different messages for different audiences, all promoting the same product. The company sponsored public events and exhibitions. At county fairs and state expositions, Kellogg's booths distributed samples and promotional materials. The company became associated with wholesome American values: farming, family, simple goodness. Radio advertising began in the 1920s as the new medium emerged. Kellogg's sponsored programs, bought airtime, and created jingles that people hummed. The connection between cereal and children's entertainment, a relationship that would define the industry, was forming. The marketing worked spectacularly. By 1915, Kellogg's was selling over 1 million cases of Corn Flakes annually. The company expanded internationally, selling in Canada, Australia, and eventually worldwide. The name Kellogg's became synonymous with breakfast cereal. But success bred competition. Post, Quaker, and other companies copied WK's marketing techniques. They created their own cartoon characters, offered their own collectibles, bought their own advertising. The cereal aisle was becoming crowded. WK responded by innovating faster. New products joined Corn Flakes, all brand in 1916, positioning Kellogg's as offering both taste and health. Rice Krispies in 1928, with their memorable snap, crackle, pop marketing, and eventually dozens of varieties targeting different tastes and needs. Each new product was launched with extensive advertising. Each had distinctive packaging. Each promised something specific: crispier texture, better taste, more nutrition. The cereal aisle was becoming a marketplace of promises, each box competing for attention and trust. W.K. Kellogg had transformed his brother's bland health food into an icon of American breakfast, not through superior nutrition or profound health benefits, but through brilliant marketing that associated Corn Flakes with happiness, convenience, and family. The breakfast cereal that started as medicine had become something else entirely, a consumer product, sold not on need, but on desire. And WK had discovered that creating desire was more profitable than treating disease. The religion John Harvey Kellogg had founded on biologic living and moral purity had been replaced by a different faith. The belief that the right breakfast cereal could make your family happier, your mornings easier, and your life better. Millions of Americans believed, and every morning they poured themselves a bowl of proof. Through the 1920s and 1930s, breakfast cereals remained relatively simple: corn flakes, wheat flakes, puffed grains, shredded wheat. They were lightly sweetened, if at all, positioned as wholesome nutrition for families. But children didn't necessarily love them. The cereals were fine, acceptable, but not particularly exciting. Kids ate them because parents served them, not because they craved them. The cereal companies noticed this, and in the 1930s, they began a quiet revolution, making cereals that children would actively want, even beg for. The tool they used was sugar. Ranger Joe Popped Wheat Honeys, introduced in 1939, was one of the first deliberately sugar-coated cereals. The wheat puffs were coated in honey and sugar, making them sweet enough to eat like candy. Children loved them. Post followed with Sugar Crisp in 1949, Rice Puffs coated in caramelized sugar. Kellogg's responded with Sugar Corn Pops in 1950 and Sugar Frosted Flakes in 1952. General Mills introduced Sugar Jets and Trix. The names were honest. Sugar, right in the title. This wasn't hidden or disguised. The cereals were candy sweet, and that was the selling point. The marketing targeted children directly through a new medium, television. Saturday morning cartoons became sponsored by cereal companies. Animated characters like Tony the Tiger, Toucan Sam, and the Trix Rabbit were created specifically to sell cereal to children. These weren't subtle advertisements. The cartoon mascots appeared in the shows and in the commercial breaks, creating seamless connections between entertainment and product. Children watching cartoons saw their favorite characters endorsing specific cereals dozens of times each morning. The mascots were strategically designed, friendly, colorful, speaking in simple language children understood. They had catchphrases, "They're grrrreet" for Tony the Tiger, "Silly Rabbit," "Tricks are for kids." The phrases became part of childhood vocabulary. The cereal boxes themselves were covered with games, puzzles, and activities. The back of the box was something to read while eating breakfast, turning the cereal box into entertainment. Some boxes included cut-out masks or toys. Others offered mail-in prizes, send-in box tops, and money for a decoder ring or plastic toy. The strategy was brilliant and cynical. By marketing directly to children, cereal companies created demand that parents had to satisfy. Children didn't ask for cereal. They asked specifically for Frosted Flakes or Lucky Charms or whichever brand they'd seen advertised. Parents who resisted faced tantrums and negotiations. Grocery shopping with children became an exercise in saying no to dozens of products they'd been programmed to want. Many parents gave in, especially if the cereals claimed to be nutritious. And the cereals did make nutrition claims. Despite containing as much sugar as candy, they were fortified with vitamins and minerals. They were part of a balanced breakfast when shown in ads alongside juice, milk, and fruit. They were wholesome grains. These claims weren't necessarily false. Many sugary cereals were indeed fortified with nutrients, making them technically more nutritious than plain sugar. But the emphasis on added vitamins obscured the high sugar content. Advocacy groups began pushing back in the 1970s. Nutritionists and consumer advocates criticized marketing sugar-laden products to children. They pointed out that many cereals were more than 40% sugar by weight, comparable to cookies or candy. The Federal Trade Commission considered regulations limiting advertising to children. Cereal companies fought back hard, arguing that parents made purchase decisions and that restrictions would violate free speech rights. Eventually, the industry adopted voluntary guidelines, limiting the amount of advertising time during children's programming, placing some restrictions on content. But the fundamental strategy of marketing sugar cereals to children continued. In the 1980s and 1990s, facing health criticism, companies began removing sugar from product names. Sugar Frosted Flakes became Frosted Flakes. Sugar Corn Pops became Corn Pops. The formulas remained largely unchanged, but the names suggested less candy-like products. Healthier alternatives appeared alongside the sugar bombs. Whole grain varieties, reduced sugar options, cereals with added fiber. These gave parents alternatives and allowed companies to argue they were responding to health concerns while continuing to market Fruit Loops and Cap'n Crunch to children. The sugar transformation completed the distance between John Harvey Kellogg's original vision and modern cereal. He'd created bland Corn Flakes to suppress pleasure and promote moral living. The industry built on his invention sold literal, sugar-coated pleasure to children using cartoon characters. The irony would have appalled John Harvey. His breakfast cereal, designed to prevent sin, had become a vehicle for one of the sweetest indulgences in the American diet. The food meant to calm the passions was now colored bright pink and shaped like tiny donuts. But W.K. Kellogg probably would have approved. He'd understood from the beginning that people wanted pleasure with their health. That taste mattered more than ideology, that the path to commercial success lay in giving consumers what they craved, not what someone thought they should have. The sugar conspiracy, if you can call it that, was capitalism at work. Companies found that children wanted sweet cereal. They provided it. Parents bought it. Profits followed. And every morning, millions of children poured bowls of brightly colored, sugar-coated flakes and loops and puffs, eating candy for breakfast and calling it nutrition. John Harvey Kellogg's religion had been thoroughly reformed, and sugar was its new sacrament. While the cereal companies thrived and expanded globally, the Battle Creek Sanitarium, the institution that had started it all, was collapsing. The decline began slowly in the 1920s and accelerated through the 1930s and 1940s. Several factors contributed. Modern medicine was advancing, and many of John Harvey Kellogg's theories were being discredited. His emphasis on bowel health, his warnings about auto-intoxication from retained feces, his claims about diets preventing disease, these were increasingly recognized as exaggerated or simply wrong. The Great Depression hit the sanitarium hard. Its wealthy clientele could no longer afford extended stays. The middle-class health seekers who'd been regular visitors cut back on discretionary health spending. Occupancy dropped dramatically. Kellogg tried to adapt. He reduced prices, offered shorter programs, promoted the sanitarium more aggressively. But the fundamental problem remained. The medical establishment no longer took his methods seriously, and insurance companies wouldn't reimburse for treatments that weren't scientifically validated. World War II was the final blow. The government took over the sanitarium building in 1942 to use as a military hospital. Kellogg was essentially evicted from the institution he'd led for over 60 years. He continued operating a much smaller facility elsewhere in Battle Creek, but it was a shadow of the Grand Sanitarium. John Harvey Kellogg died in 1943 at age 91, having outlived most of his contemporaries. His obituaries were respectful, but noted the decline of his influence. The medical establishment he'd never quite joined acknowledged his contributions to nutrition awareness while distancing themselves from his more extreme theories. The Battle Creek Sanitarium building was never returned to its original purpose. After the war, it briefly operated as a military hospital, then was converted to a federal office building. The grand institution that had housed thousands of patients was gone, existing only in memory and photographs. The irony is profound. The sanitarium disappeared, but the cereal industry it accidentally spawned became a multi-billion-dollar global enterprise. John Harvey Kellogg's medical theories were forgotten, but his breakfast flakes became an American icon. W.K. Kellogg, who'd broken with his brother to commercialize Corn Flakes, didn't attend John Harvey's funeral. The decades-long estrangement between the brothers never healed. They'd started from the same place but diverged completely, one pursuing health mission, the other pursuing profit. W.K. outlived his brother by 8 years, dying in 1951 at age 91. But he'd already stepped back from the company's daily operations. watching from the sidelines as a new generation of executives managed the expanding empire he'd built. The Kellogg Company that survived bore little resemblance to the health food operation WK had founded. It was a sophisticated marketing organization, skilled at creating demand for sweetened grain products through advertising and branding. Health was one claim among many, not the central mission. Other Battle Creek cereal companies faced similar trajectories. Post was acquired by General Foods and became part of a much larger food conglomerate. The dozens of small cereal manufacturers that had flourished in Battle Creek's early days were gone, unable to compete with the massive advertising budgets and distribution networks of the major companies. By the 1960s, Battle Creek's identity as the cereal capital of the world was fading. Kellogg's still had its headquarters there, and Post operated facilities nearby, but the manufacturing had largely moved elsewhere. The city became just another mid-sized Midwestern town, remarkable mainly for its unusual history. Efforts to preserve that history had mixed success. The sanitarium building changed hands multiple times and fell into disrepair. Parts were demolished. The remaining structure was eventually converted into apartments and offices, with little acknowledgement of its former purpose. John Harvey Kellogg's legacy became complicated. His contributions to nutrition, promoting whole grains, vegetables, nuts, were real and beneficial. His emphasis on exercise and clean living was ahead of its time. But his eugenics advocacy, his extreme views on sexuality, and his pseudo-scientific theories about race and heredity cast a shadow over these contributions. Modern dietary science would validate some of Kellogg's ideas while thoroughly debunking others. He was right that American diets needed more whole grains and less meat. He was right that exercise promoted health. But his claims about bland food preventing moral corruption, about the dangers of sexual activity, about yogurt enemas curing disease, these were nonsense, sometimes harmful nonsense. The sanitarium's strange treatments became historical curiosities. The electrical contraptions, the vigorous massages, the alternating hot and cold baths, they seem almost comic from a modern perspective. But for the people who experienced them, they were serious medical interventions submitted to in hope of healing. What remains of Battle Creek's sanitarium era are fragments, buildings repurposed, photographs in archives, memories in old books, and of course, the cereal. The corn flakes that started as therapy are still produced, still eaten by millions, still carrying the Kellogg name, but they're disconnected from their origin. Few people eating Kellogg's corn flakes for breakfast know about the sanitarium, about John Harvey's theories, about the religious health movement that spawned the modern cereal industry. The breakfast cereal that started a religion outlived the religion. The product survived while the ideology disappeared. And perhaps that was inevitable. Ideologies fade. Products endure. The Battle Creek Sanitarium is gone. But Kellogg's Corn Flakes remain, a delicious irony that John Harvey could never have anticipated. By the 1960s, American-style breakfast cereal was spreading globally, carrying with it American ideas about breakfast, nutrition, and convenience. The globalization of corn flakes is a story of cultural adaptation and culinary imperialism. Kellogg's and Post expanded internationally after World War II, establishing factories in Canada, Britain, Australia, and eventually across Europe, Latin America, and Asia. Each market required adaptation, but the basic product and marketing approach remained consistent. Britain was an early and enthusiastic adopter. Rationing during and after WW had created demand for convenient, shelf-stable foods. Corn Flakes fit perfectly. They required no cooking, needed minimal sugar, important during rationing, and came in standardized portions. By the 1960s, Corn Flakes were a standard British breakfast, but adaptation was necessary. British tastes differed from American. The cereals sold in Britain were often less sweet than their American counterparts. Marketing emphasized nutrition and value rather than fun and excitement. British Corn Flakes ads were more reserved than the exuberant American versions. Australia and New Zealand also adopted breakfast cereals readily. The climate and cultural ties to Britain made the transition smooth. Weet-Bix, a local variant of shredded wheat, became hugely popular and competed successfully with imported brands. Continental Europe proved more challenging. In France, where breakfast traditionally consisted of coffee and a croissant, convincing people to eat cereal required changing deep-rooted habits. Germans, who favored bread and cold cuts for breakfast, were similarly resistant. The strategy was to target children. Advertise sweetened cereals on children's television, create localized mascots and packaging, and let children create demand that would shift family breakfast habits. This worked gradually. By the 1980s, cereal consumption in France and Germany was growing, though it never reached American levels. Latin America adopted cereals more enthusiastically, particularly in urban areas where American influence was strong. Corn Flakes, Zucaritas, Frosted Flakes, and other Kellogg's products became common in Mexican, Brazilian, and Argentine supermarkets. Asia represented the most challenging and interesting markets. In Japan, breakfast traditionally consisted of rice, miso soup, and pickled vegetables, very different from Western cereal. Initial attempts to sell Corn Flakes failed because they didn't fit existing breakfast frameworks. The breakthrough came from positioning cereals not as breakfast foods, but as snacks or desserts. Rice-based cereals were developed that felt more familiar to Japanese consumers. Gradually, particularly among younger, Western-influenced Japanese, cereal for breakfast became acceptable, if not dominant. India, with its diverse regional cuisines and vegetarian traditions, might seem like a natural cereal market. But traditional Indian breakfasts, dosas, idlis, parathas, were freshly cooked and warm. Cold milk and cereal seemed bizarre and unappetizing to many Indians. Kellogg's adapted by marketing cereals with warm milk and suggesting they be served as an evening snack rather than breakfast. They developed flavors suited to Indian tastes: mango, rose, cardamom. Despite these efforts, cereal remains a niche product in India, consumed mainly by urban, westernized families. China presented similar challenges. Traditional Chinese breakfast is savory: congee, dumplings, soy milk. Sweet cold cereals seemed alien. The market existed primarily among parents who'd embraced Western ideas about nutrition and wanted to give their children calcium and vitamins from milk and fortified cereal. The globalization of breakfast cereal reflects broader patterns of American cultural influence. The idea that breakfast should be quick, convenient, sweet, and individually portioned is distinctly American. Traditional breakfasts in most cultures were communal, freshly cooked, and savory. Cereal companies weren't just selling products, they were selling a lifestyle. The advertisements showed modern families, happy children, efficient mornings. The implicit message: this is how progressive, successful people eat breakfast, this cultural influence had consequences. As cereals became more common globally, traditional breakfast foods declined. Time-intensive preparation of fresh foods was replaced by pouring from a box. Family breakfast rituals gave way to individual bowls eaten quickly before school or work. Nutritionists raised concerns about this shift. Traditional breakfasts, while time-consuming, were often more nutritious and less processed than sugary cereals. The global spread of American-style breakfast coincided with rising rates of diabetes, obesity, and other diet-related diseases. But convenience won. In a globalizing world where both parents often work and mornings are rushed, the appeal of cereal is undeniable. Pour, add milk, eat, done. No cooking, minimal cleanup. Kids can serve themselves. The breakfast cereal that John Harvey Kellogg created in a Michigan sanitarium now sits on supermarket shelves from Buenos Aires to Bangkok, from Sydney to Stockholm. His Corn Flakes became one of the most globally distributed food products in history. But that global product bears little resemblance to Kellogg's original vision. It's sweet, it's marketed for pleasure, and it's disconnected from any health philosophy beyond vague claims about vitamins and whole grains. The religion Kellogg founded didn't spread globally, but his cereal did. And in spreading, it carried American assumptions about food, time, convenience, and the proper way to start the day. The global breakfast is now, in many places, poured from a box. Whether that's progress or loss depends on your perspective. But it's undeniably a transformation, one that started with a doctor who believed cornflakes could cure sin and ended with Tony the Tiger selling frosted flakes in Tokyo. Stand in the cereal aisle of a modern American supermarket, and you're confronted with abundance bordering on absurdity. Hundreds of varieties, dozens of brands, a kaleidoscope of colors and claims and cartoon characters, all competing for attention. There are healthy cereals, bran flakes, granola, muesli, whole grain options with minimal sugar. There are indulgent cereals, chocolate-flavored, marshmallow-studded, candy-coated varieties that are essentially dessert. There are targeted cereals for children, for adults, for weight loss, for heart health, for energy. The packages make promises. Lowers cholesterol, good source of fiber, made with real fruit. No artificial colors. Each box is a small billboard, designed by teams of marketers and graphic designers to catch your eye and communicate value in seconds. This abundance is recent. In the 1950s, most stores carried a dozen varieties. By the 1980s, the number had exploded as companies launched endless variations, different flavors, different shapes, different health claims. New cereals appeared constantly, unsuccessful ones disappeared quietly. The strategy was brand proliferation. If Kellogg's could occupy more shelf space with more varieties, there was less room for competitors. Each cereal served a niche, targeted a specific consumer segment, or simply provided a new option to keep the category feeling fresh and innovative. For consumers, this created choice overload. How do you select from 200 options? Most people develop brand loyalty or routines. They buy the same few cereals repeatedly. Others are influenced by children who want the cereal with the best toy or the most appealing cartoon character. Price differences are dramatic. Generic cornflakes cost a fraction of name-brand varieties, despite being nearly identical. Specialty granolas or organic cereals command premium prices. The cereal aisle spans from budget staples to luxury breakfast foods. Health claims have become increasingly sophisticated, and sometimes questionable. Cereals are fortified with vitamins and minerals, but those vitamins are added to grain that's been processed until little natural nutrition remains. They're whole grain, but also contain substantial sugar and salt. The FDA regulates some claims, but companies have become adept at working within regulations while implying benefits that may not be substantiated. Part of a complete breakfast became a ubiquitous phrase after regulations limited direct health claims. It suggests nutritional value without actually promising anything specific. The cereal aisle reflects changing American dietary concerns. In the 1980s and 90s, low-fat cereals proliferated as dietary fat was demonized. In the 2000s, low-carb and high-protein cereals appeared. Recently, gluten-free, organic, and ancient grain varieties have expanded. Each trend spawns dozens of products. When quinoa became trendy, quinoa cereals appeared. When chia seeds became popular health foods, cereals with chia sprouted across the aisle. The industry is remarkably responsive to dietary fashions. But beneath the variety, most cereals are variations on a few basic formulas: corn flakes, wheat flakes, puffed grains, granola. The shapes change: loops, squares, flakes, clusters, and the coatings vary: sugar, honey, chocolate, yogurt. But the fundamental products are simple grain-based foods. The marketing creates the differentiation. Special K is for weight-conscious women. Wheaties is for athletes. Lucky Charms is for kids who like marshmallows. Grape Nuts is for serious, no-nonsense adults. These identities are constructed through advertising, not inherent in the products. Private label cereals, store brands, have steadily gained market share by offering near-identical products at lower prices. A box of store-brand Corn Flakes might cost half what Kellogg's charges. For many consumers, the brand premium isn't worth it. This has forced brand name manufacturers to compete on quality and innovation. They launch new flavors, new varieties, limited editions, anything to maintain the perception that their products are worth a higher price. The result is an aisle in constant flux. New cereals appear monthly. Failed products disappear. Successful ones spawn variations and spin-offs. The churn is continuous, creating an illusion of innovation in a category that's fundamentally stable. Stand in that aisle long enough, and the absurdity becomes apparent. Do we really need 40 different sugary cereals marketed to children? Do the subtle flavor variations between similar products matter? Is anyone's life meaningfully improved by having 200 breakfast options instead of 20? But the abundance serves the industry well. The more shelf space cereals occupy, the more opportunities for impulse purchases. The more varieties exist, the less room for new competitors to enter. The category's complexity creates barriers to entry. And for consumers, the overflowing cereal aisle represents choice, abundance, the American promise that you can have exactly what you want, that somewhere among those hundreds of boxes is the perfect breakfast cereal for you. Whether that choice is meaningful or merely overwhelming is debatable, but it's undeniably what the breakfast cereal industry has become: a monument to product proliferation, marketing sophistication, and the transformation of John Harvey Kellogg's simple health food into an entire ecosystem of processed grain products. The cereal aisle is capitalism's cathedral, and every morning millions of worshippers select their preferred variety, pour it into bowls, and participate in a ritual that spans continents and generations. The breakfast cereal that started a religion has become an industry, and the industry's temple is the supermarket aisle where Corn Flakes and their descendants compete for devotees. It's quiet now. In your kitchen, there's probably a box of cereal. Maybe it's Corn Flakes, the original, still surviving after over a century. Maybe it's something newer, more colorful, shaped like tiny donuts or coated in chocolate. Tomorrow morning, you might pour yourself a bowl. Add milk. Eat quickly, perhaps, while checking your phone or reading the news. The ritual takes minutes, requires no thought, no preparation. And in those minutes, you'll participate in a tradition that connects you to millions of people worldwide and to over 100 years of history. That bowl of cereal links you to John Harvey Kellogg's Sanitarium, to WK's marketing genius, to the transformation of American breakfast. Most mornings, you won't think about any of this. The cereal is just breakfast, ordinary and unremarkable. That's its triumph, becoming so normal that its strangeness disappears. But the story behind that bowl is strange. A doctor who believed bland food prevented sin. A businessman who turned health food into mass-market product. An industry built on marketing sugar-coated grains to children using cartoon characters. The breakfast cereal that started as medicine became candy. The food designed to suppress pleasure became one of childhood's sweetest treats. The bland corn flakes that were supposed to cure moral ailments became Fruit Loops and Lucky Charms and Cap'n Crunch. John Harvey Kellogg would be appalled by the modern cereal aisle. Everything he opposed, sugar, pleasure, indulgence, appealing to base desires, is embodied in those brightly colored boxes. His austere health mission has been thoroughly commercialized and sweetened. Yet his legacy is undeniable. Before Kellogg, breakfast was heavy, time-consuming, and required cooking. After Kellogg, breakfast could be poured from a box, eaten in minutes, and required no preparation. That transformation changed how people start their days. The convenience is real. For working parents, for busy students, for anyone racing through morning routines, cereal offers effortless nutrition. You might question the nutrition quality, but you can't deny the convenience. The global reach is staggering. Corn Flakes are eaten in over 180 countries. The basic concept, toasted grain flakes with milk, has been adapted to countless cultures and markets. A simple idea from a Michigan sanitarium became one of history's most widely distributed food products. The industry's marketing innovations influenced advertising far beyond food. The use of mascots, collectibles, direct marketing to children, celebrity endorsements. These techniques were pioneered or perfected by cereal companies and spread throughout consumer marketing. The health claims and counterclaims continue. Every few years, cereals are demonized or celebrated based on current nutritional fashions. They're too sugary, or they're whole grain goodness. They're processed junk, or they're fortified nutrition. The debate never settles because the truth is complicated. Some cereals are indeed nutritious, minimally processed whole grains with little added sugar. Others are essentially candy, providing calories and vitamins, but little else of value. Most fall somewhere in between. The category is too diverse for simple judgments. What's certain is that cereal isn't going anywhere. Despite periodic predictions of its demise, despite competition from fast food breakfast and protein bars and other quick options, cereal persists. It's too convenient, too familiar, too deeply embedded in breakfast culture. New varieties continue appearing, responding to dietary trends and taste preferences. The industry adapts, survives, occasionally thrives. It's matured beyond its explosive growth phase, but remains substantial and profitable. And every morning, that familiar ritual repeats. Box opened, flakes poured, milk added, spoon lifted. Billions of repetitions daily across the globe. A simple act, barely noticed, connecting you to this strange history. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, think about breakfast, about John Harvey Kellogg in his sanitarium, experimenting with wheat dough to create digestible bread, about the accident that created flakes instead of sheets. Think about W.K. Kellogg, seeing commercial potential his brother missed, building a company that would outlast both of them, about the marketing genius that turned bland health food into beloved American staple. Think about the cereal aisle, packed with hundreds of varieties, each promising something: health, taste, convenience, nostalgia. About the cartoon characters that sold millions of boxes to children. Think about the global spread of this distinctly American food, carrying with it American ideas about breakfast, time, convenience, and proper nutrition. And think about your own memories. The cereals you ate as a child. The boxes you read while eating breakfast. The arguments about sugar content or favorite varieties. The small rituals that built your mornings. Tomorrow, you might pour cereal, or you might not. But the option exists, available and easy, because over a century ago, a doctor who feared pleasure accidentally invented convenience. He believed corn flakes could cure sin. He was wrong about that, but he changed breakfast, and in changing breakfast, he changed mornings, changed daily routines, changed how millions of people around the world start their days. The breakfast cereal that started a religion outlived the religion. The product survived while the ideology faded. And that's perhaps as it should be. Ideologies are rigid. Products adapt. The corn flakes endured by becoming something their creator never intended: sweet, indulgent, pleasurable, by abandoning the mission and embracing the market. The bowl you'll pour tomorrow contains no trace of John Harvey Kellogg's philosophy. It won't cure sin or suppress your passions or promote biologic living. It's just breakfast. Quick, easy, familiar. And maybe that's the real miracle. Not that a doctor created a health food, but that his creation escaped his control and became something else entirely, something ordinary and universal. The breakfast cereal that started as religion ended as routine, and in that transformation, it achieved a different kind of immortality. Not the immortality of remembered ideology, but the immortality of daily use, present in millions of homes, poured every morning, unremarkable and essential. The corn flakes remain, the religion is gone, and the bowl waits for tomorrow. Zip, the sound of a box opening. Rustle, the sound of flakes pouring. Clink, the spoon in the bowl. The soundtrack of breakfast. The ritual continues. The legacy persists, one bowl at a time. Good night, sleep well, and tomorrow morning, whatever you pour, remember, you're eating history. Delicious, convenient, slightly absurd history.